She came home not knowing that there were two killers waiting in her house for her.
911, what is your emergency?
My friend, Teresa Severs, she's a doctor, and she's dead on the floor.
Hi, I'm Dr. Teresa Severs, and as I promised you, I was going to be bringing you different modalities of healing.
Dr. Severs had a very strong personality. A lot of people found her polarizing. They loved her or they didn't.
I want to enjoy my life like it is now.
This was almost the perfect crime.
And she just said, I know what happened.
Then how'd you kill her? I mean, he made a stupid little chuckle that he does and then said with a...
One question no one's answered. Why? Why? Why is Teresa Severs dead?
Pure and simple, a tale of murder and salaciousness.
You see that, paradise isn't paradise. And maybe these pieces of the puzzle are starting to add up.
Over County 911, what's the address of your emergency room? Okay, your wife is in a bar, you said she's unresponsive?
This is what he's going to tell you.
How to get out of that situation.
And I grabbed the gun.
Trying to find the first place to put a body.
No, sir.
The only thing they could do was kill him.
You want to say anything? We, the jury, and to find the defendant.
Hi, I'm Dr. Teresa Severs.
She was well liked as a doctor. She had a holistic physician's practice.
I don't know about you, but I'm not ready for postmortem. I want to enjoy my life like it is now.
I think everyone that speaks of her, from including her family, talked about her being a dynamo.
Are you ready to drop dead? I'm not.
But at the age of 46, Dr. Teresa Severs was found dead in the kitchen of her home in Bonita Springs, Florida, brutally murdered.
I mean, this was a violent crime that occurred in the midst of an area that didn't see violent crime and on a street that didn't see violent crime. And people were upset. People were worried.
This doctor had touched many lives and tried to help different people. So I started to get calls from all over. My son goes to that doc. My daughter-in-law goes to that doc. Wow, what a wonderful woman.
She was last seen alive at the Fort Myers, Florida airport the night before.
Because we were able to observe her in the airport on surveillance video, we ended up learning that Dr. Severs was returning home from a family gathering for her mother's birthday from Connecticut.
Her husband Mark and two daughters, Josephine and Carmela, stayed behind.
And Mom came home because Dr. Severs was the primary breadwinner and she had a practice to run.
But the next day, Dr. Severs failed to show up at her doctor's office.
The employees at her job started texting her husband, Mark Severs, saying, hey, Dr. Severs isn't here.
So her husband called a next-door neighbor, Dr. Mark Petritas, to check on her.
Hey, Mark. This is Mark. Teresa's not at work yet. And the office is calling and texting, and we can't get through to Teresa. Maybe she's just sound asleep. It's just not like her. In all the years I've known her to be a half hour late for work.
Dr. Mark Petritas was the first one who found her.
911, what is your emergency?
I'm at a friend's house. He's out of town, and I came here to check on his wife, and she's dead on the floor.
Oh, sir, hold on, stay on the line.
Yes.
Okay, you're doing very well.
And she's bashed in the back of the head. And she's cold. She's dead cold.
It appeared that nothing had been taken. Did not appear that the house had been ransacked. There was nothing that indicated what the motive might be for what was a very vicious crime.
Upon my initial observations that she has sustained significant head trauma, blunt force in nature, and there was a large pool of blood, and she was a smaller female. You could tell that it was not something that happened quickly.
The case was assigned to Lee County Sheriff's detectives Mike Downs and David Levitt.
There's no obvious smoking gun, for lack of a better choice of words.
Pretty much everybody's a suspect at that point. Who does her nails, who does her hair, who cuts the lawn? Do they have a house cleaner? Have they had any issues with anybody? Does she get along with everybody at work? But nothing really seemed to pan out. We did later find out that she also had a very strong personality, which can rub people the wrong way.
It's not wrong, but it's not enough.
There was also speculation that Dr. Severs had been targeted because of her practice as a holistic doctor.
Why aren't we doing this kind of medicine for our body? You can have preventive medicine, but it's not the kind of medicine you typically get at your doctor's office.
There was a group of people identify themselves as web sleuths, and they took a very big interest in this case because throughout the country, in at least 2 to possibly 3 other states at that time, there were some doctors that also practiced holistic medicine as well as internal medicine that died. And the theory was that they were all murdered and that we had to look at because, like Mike said, right now, it's everybody and their brother.
The theory of it was that there were certain holistic doctors who were being murdered because they had maybe a cure for cancer or had something that the government or some kind of shadowy group didn't want them to talk about. But that turned out not to be the case.
Just for the record, state your name one more time for me.
Mark Severs.
And to be thorough, the detectives did conduct an interview with Teresa's husband, Mark, once he returned from Connecticut.
Anytime there is a brutal murder of a spouse, one tends to look, or at least glance, at the other spouse. But in this case, the spouse was thousands of miles away in Connecticut at the time that the crime was committed, with an alibi that was absolutely airtight.
I guess I feel pathetic, but at the same time, there's so much going on.
That's not pathetic.
But it's hard. I feel that I could have stopped this from happening. How do I get over that feeling?
It's going to take time. It really will.
Can you tell me when she died? I need to know if she tortured you as what happened to her.
We can't tell at this stage. We're still working on that.
She had so much to offer the world. She was really, everyone says this about their wife. I should have been home.
Everyone kept describing Mark as her rock, and she was his rock. Have you ever cheated on your wife?
I've never cheated on her, and she's never cheated on me.
Have you ever had anyone have an unhealthy obsession with either you or your wife or your kids or anything?
I absolutely can't think of anybody that would have been with that at all.
The detectives ended the interview so Mark Severs could plan Teresa's funeral and grieve with their 2 daughters.
Yeah, the funeral was befitting somebody of her stature. Here's this lady that really helped everybody, and now she's gone, and they mourned that fact.
But still, not a single clue about who had been waiting for Teresa that Sunday night as she pulled into her garage after telling her husband she was home and she was safe.
How had anyone gone into this crime scene, committed this horrific crime, and left absolutely no trace evidence? This was almost the perfect crime.
Until a late-night phone call would lead detectives to a small town in Missouri.
And we catch a break. We get a tip.
And she just said, I know what happened.
The call that would be the turning point in the case came into the Lee County Sheriff's Office late at night, some 2 weeks after the murder of Dr. Teresa Severs.
Thank God. I thought, praise God. Seriously.
The tip came from a family friend of a man in a small town in Missouri, Hillsboro, Missouri. A man by the name of Curtis Wayne Wright, a 5-time convicted felon.
Sure enough, the more we dug, the more evidence started to pile up for us, thankfully.
And soon the detectives were on the trail of a second career criminal who was a close friend of Curtis Wayne Wright, a man by the name of Jimmy Ray Rogers.
Jimmy Ray Rogers liked to call himself the Hammer. It was on his Facebook. He liked to refer to himself as the Hammer.
Both men, Jimmy Ray Rogers and Curtis Wayne Wright, were now very much persons of interest, but they both had denied being in Florida at the time of the murder.
And Curtis Wright told us that during the weekend of the murder, first he told us he was homesick in bed and never left his trailer. And then at one point he said, well, I was working on a car all weekend.
And Jimmy was beside himself. He barely talked to us, and then just to let us know he just doesn't like cops, so I'm not going to talk to you. I didn't go to Florida, And I don't talk to Wayne. He's a nerd. Oh, okay. See you later, Jimmy.
But even with the tip and the detective's gut feelings, there still wasn't anywhere near enough to arrest them, and the detectives returned to Florida deflated.
We had a lot of digital evidence that we found that we knew we had to process and try and piece it together. Most notably, when we did the initial warrant on the Curtis Wayne Wright residence, there was a vehicle in the driveway, and we found a GPS in the center console. So we were hoping, let's just hope he entered addresses in here. Let's hope it tracked his movement.
And at first, we're deflated again because they're telling us this information is deleted and we can't interpret the code. So they spent a significant amount of time, hundreds and hundreds of man hours, trying to figure out this code to recover this deleted data.
And bingo.
They were able to establish a route from Curtis Wayne Wright's residence in Hillsborough, Missouri, and he makes a route there to go to Jimmy Rogers' residence in Cadet, Missouri. We went from 0 to 60 in a very short amount of time.
And then 1,104 miles south along Interstate 75, off the exit to Bonita Springs, and then right to Jarvis Road, the home of Dr. Teresa Severs.
I think it was an aha moment, and I think at that moment there is the, wait a minute, we have people saying we're not here, and they are.
Retrieving that address, which would have been deleted just hours or days later, and placing the killers in the area of our victim was a critical piece of this puzzle.
And the GPS data showed their every movement on the way south.
One of the significant locations was a Walmart, actually right across the street from the sheriff's office here, where we're able to capture what we believe and what is evidently Curtis Wayne Wright and Jimmy Ray Rogers walking into Walmart, buying a number of suspicious items, lockpick set, garbage bags, cleaning items, things like that. So now we know they're down here. We could see them clear as day on the video.
On the day Dr. Severs returned home. We couldn't even believe it. The only thing we can think of is that they never thought we'd ever come up there because it's over 1,000 miles away, that they never would put two and two together.
And when the detectives returned to Missouri and went to question the Hammer's girlfriend, Taylor Showmaker, they hit even more pay dirt.
And she started crying, and she just said, I know what happened.
And I told him that I knew that he had something to do with it.
Okay.
And then he started asking me questions like, what do I know about? And I'm like, well, I know you went down there to kill somebody. And then he said, yeah. I said, did you shoot her? And he said, no. And I said, then how'd you kill her? And he made a stupid little chuckle that he does and then said, with a hammer.
You said with a hammer?
Yeah.
Her man had confessed to her while lying in bed.
It's huge because he actually confessed. Jimmy Ray Rogers confessed to the murder and specifically said that they used a hammer, which is consistent with the physical evidence that we recovered from the scene.
And then Taylor Showmaker took Detective Lebed to the area where she had helped her boyfriend, the Hammer, dispose of some of the evidence, including a blue jumpsuit he said he wore during the murder.
Case number 15-268513. Time now is currently 6:38 p.m. on Tuesday, August 25th, 2015. All right, Mission Maker, can you just walk me over to where you've identified the overalls?
And then she goes, there it is right there. And sure enough, we get out, we walk up to it, and it's a blue jumpsuit sitting on the side of the road.
How did we come to find these items today?
Thrown out the window.
Okay, and what was the reason for throwing these out the window?
Because he murdered somebody.
Who's he?
Jimmy Rogers.
They had their evidence. They had their killers. But the investigation was far from over. Curtis Wayne Wright now tells the authorities he has information they will want if he can make a deal with them.
So as difficult as it was to us a decision that had to be made to let Wright plead to second-degree murder and receive a sentence of 25 years, provided he testified truthfully.
Wright's information involved his best friend in high school, back in Missouri, Mark Severs, Teresa Severs' husband. And now it was turning into a case of murder for hire.
Just breathe. Go slow breathing. That way you get oxygen and makes you feel better. Through the nose.
Thank you.
There you go, see?
Even before his best friend in Missouri had implicated Mark Severs in the murder of his wife Teresa, the detectives were already suspicious of Severs, especially after a second round of questioning.
So we've met many people through our investigations that have lost a loved one, and he seemed fake.
When detectives would leave the interrogation room, they had a sense Severs was playing to the cameras.
I know you put this bastard in jail. Okay, she got hit coming in the house.
I saw a lot of simulated behavior. It didn't feel real.
How could you have been hit?
It was so much of a, what would appear to be so much of a show.
Now, talking about your relationship, have you guys been contemplating any kind of separation or divorce? Has there been any marital problems?
The detectives would later learn from friends and family the couple indeed had both marital and financial problems.
What are some of the biggest motives for anybody to do something they shouldn't? Money's a big one. Infidelity is another. So we have two of those on the board right now.
You can see there's more of a darker side to who he really was and who he wanted to show us.
As he was leaving, he said, "I'll do anything I can to cooperate, to assist, to catch this killer."
I want to speak to you every chance I can. I program your number on my phone, so when you call me, I know it's you. Okay.
And it isn't a week later when he's no longer willing to cooperate.
Well, he had his lawyer contact us and shut off all contact.
He ghosted us. He stopped talking. He stopped cooperating.
But prosecutors did not need Severs' cooperation to make their case. And the first test came with the trial of Jimmy Ray Rogers, everything hinging on whether a jury would believe Curtis Wayne Wright and his chilling version of the murder of Teresa Severs.
We came there to kill her.
Teresa Severs' mother and sister were in the courtroom every day.
Were you able to see where he was hitting her with the hammer?
In the head.
And what happened after she fell on the floor?
He continued to hit her.
He continued to hit her?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes. I physically walked over to the area where he was at and asked him to stop. Put my hand on him.
It didn't take long for the jury to return a verdict.
We have a verdict in the Jimmy Ray Rogers case. Yes, we do have a guilty verdict. We do have a guilty verdict in Jimmy Ray Rogers, but it is of second-degree murder, not a first-degree murder.
Rogers was later sentenced to 25 years in prison. But for prosecutors, there would be no justice unless they could make a case against the man they believed had hired the killers, Mark Severs.
But for Mark Severs, there would have been no funeral. There would have been no grieving family. There would have been no children without parents. It was important that all that participated were held accountable.
The evidence against Severs continued to mount, including his use of prepaid, or what are called burner phones, used by both men.
Mark Severs and Curtis Wayne Wright had a secret communication system set up.
Their code word together was switch to other or other. They would almost immediately switch over to these prepaid phones, and we were able to establish a connection.
According to what Wright told the detectives, the plan for the murder was made when Mark Severs attended Wright's wedding in Missouri 2 months earlier.
This is basically where it all, started to come together. Mark suggested two scenarios. One was to shoot her or kill her outside of the medical practice when she was leaving work one night. Curtis explains to me, he says, well, what if she's with somebody when she comes out of the medical practice? And Mark says, well, that'll be better because if somebody else is killed during the offense, then it's likely to keep the suspicion off of me or anybody else. So, and he explained it as collateral damage, which goes to show you the type of person Mark Severs really is.
When the time came to arrest Mark Severs, detectives knew from their surveillance exactly where to find him.
So there wasn't really anywhere Mr. Severs was going to go where we couldn't find him, unless he had a ride into outer space that we didn't know about.
He was at home, but there was concern he was armed and might resist taking his daughters hostage.
And we knew that if he had been watching TV And he knows we got him. We knew we had to get Mark Severs, but most importantly, we had to extract him and save those children.
The job fell to Detective David Levitt.
We knew he had many guns in the home, but his behavior was erratic. So that, coupled with the fact that if he knows he's getting arrested for the murder of his wife, he has guns in the home, and there's 2 little girls present. So we were very worried. So we get to the door. I see the girls' heads kind of perk up and look towards the door, and then I see Mark start to come towards the door, phone's in his hand, and he turns around and starts to walk away. So I said to the deputy that was with me, said, we're giving this another 5 seconds and we're forcing entry. Fortunately, within half that time, he came back, opened the door, and leaned out with his phone in his hand and grabbed him by his wrist. You're under arrest for murdering your wife.
And when Mark arrived, he had a smirk that I'll never forget. It was a smirk, it was a 1,000-mile stare. He was ice cold. You could look at him and see he was ice cold, no blood in his veins, and he knew he was caught.
But the defense was preparing a surprise twist that not only was Curtis Wayne Wright a killer and a skilled liar, but that Wright was actually in love with Mark Severs and killed Teresa on his own to get her out of the way.
If Curtis can't have Mark, nobody can.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Law and Crime. Right now, we are going to see opening statements at around 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in the trial of Mark Severs.
With reporters fascinated about how much Mark Severs and Curtis Wayne Wright looked like each other.
They do look nearly identical.
I can't wait just to see these 2 former best friends looking at each other in court, one of them testifying against another. That's something straight out of a movie.
For the record, both assistant state attorneys are present. Mr. Severs is present, and both defense counsel. State's ready. Defense is ready.
The courtroom was packed, and like a wedding, there was a side for the wife, the victim's family, and a side for the husband, the accused murderer's family.
A little antagonistic in the crowd.
But unlike that day 12 years earlier, when Teresa and Mark Severs were married, there was no joy on either side today.
We'll move to opening statements at this time. State.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Cynthia Ross is the head of the homicide unit in the state's attorney's office. Her first priority was to make sure the jury knew the importance of her key witness, Curtis Wayne Wright, but that he was hardly a model citizen.
We were asking them to believe a killer.
Curtis Wayne Wright allows us to hear the conversations that occurred between he and Mark Severs. To hear how Mark Severs solicited, conspired, and arranged the murder of Teresa Severs.
Defense.
Mark Severs chose Michael Mummert as the lawyer to defend him in the murder case after the 2 bonded during proceedings over the custody of Severs' children.
On a very personal level, he's a very nice man. He's kind of goofy, kind of funny, and over the 4 years that I represented Mark, I got to like him. I really do like Mark.
You're going to hear about prepaid phones. You're going to hear about divorce, infidelity, life insurance as a motive. But ultimately, all the evidence of a conspiracy, all the evidence of Mr. Severs' involvement is going to come from one man. And that's Curtis Wayne Wright.
I wanted to convey to the jury that this was a credibility trial of Curtis Wayne Wright.
Next witness.
It was the very next day that Curtis Wayne Wright took the stand. And at first, Severs gave off the impression of not having a care in the world, smiling and cracking jokes with his lawyer. But that would quickly change.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give...
Wright was questioned by prosecutor Hamid Hunter.
The biggest moment in the trial was Mr. Wright taking the stand. These two men have been best friends most of their lives.
Mr. Wright, who killed Dr. Teresa Severs?
Jimmy Rogers and I physically did it, but Mark Severs was also involved in the planning.
Why did you do it?
I was asked to do it.
By whom?
Mr. Severs.
Is Mr. Severs in court today?
Yes, he is.
Can you please point to Mr. Severs and identify him by an article of clothing?
He's the middle gentleman there at the table. The darker colored jacket.
Well, I'm not a fan of Curtis Wright. He's a killer. He's an admitted killer. And so we went straight at him. There wasn't going to be any compromises for Mr. Wright.
And Wright was immediately confronted about his earlier lies when he tried to pin all the blame on Jimmy Ray Rogers.
Did you tell us the truth?
Not in the beginning.
Started out with a lie?
Well, it started out with the truth, but it got off in the middle, and then those lies were corrected. I told the truth before the end of that statement.
Watching all this in the courtroom was Severs' stepmother from Missouri, who has known Wright since he was 12 years old.
I'm not a human lie detector, but he did a magnificent job of lying. He's a pathological liar.
Wright testified that he and Severs, that's Severs on the left, made the deal to kill Teresa at Wright's wedding in Missouri a few months earlier.
He told me that he and Teresa were having problems, marital problems. He told me that she was having an affair, and that they were having financial problems as well, considering bankruptcy.
Did he ask you to do anything?
He told me that really the only option that he had was for her to die. And he said that he needed to have her killed.
Wright said he received a $600 check from Severs to cover expenses for driving to Florida, with the promise of much more to come.
He said that there was a lot of insurance, that him and the kids would be well taken care of, and that he had at least $100,000 to offer to have it done.
And then Wright's chilling description of how Dr. Teresa Severs was killed the night she returned home alone, just as he had testified earlier at the trial of Jimmy Ray Rogers.
The headlights would have been right on me. I jumped up and I followed her into the house.
And when she started to turn towards you, what did you do?
I hit her. I hit her with the hammer.
Does she see you?
Yes, because I accidentally kicked the dog dish over. The dishes went flying everywhere. It made a huge noise. It startled her. I was afraid that if she turned around, she would scratch me or do something to leave evidence. I swung the hammer and I hit her.
Did you and Dr. Severs ever make eye contact?
Yes.
How did she look when you made eye contact with her?
Surprised.
Did she fight?
Yeah.
You fought for her life?
Yeah. I never in a million years envisioned beating her to death with a hammer.
On cross-examination of Wright, Mark Severs' lawyer tried to push a theory about Wright's sexual orientation that he thought would explain what happened.
Detective Levitt asked you about your sexual preference, didn't he?
Yes.
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
Detective Levitt wanted to know if you had a sexual relationship with Mark Severs, didn't you?
Objection, relevance. Sustained.
The judge told Mummert to move on.
That was a tough one because there was something there. There was this air of possessiveness or intimacy, and if Curtis can't have Mark, nobody can. My theory is that when Mark went to Curtis's wedding, that Curtis just had enough. Mark married a beautiful doctor. Mark had 2 beautiful girls. Mark lived in a nice home in Bonita Springs, Florida. Why does Mark get to have it all? And I believe that anger, as well as a possible, sexual attraction to Mark, caused the basis for Curtis to finally say, no, I've had enough. I'm going to go down there. I'm going to kill Mark's wife.
But Judge Bruce Kyle was having none of it, and Mummert had to change his tact, now challenging Wright about the money he claims Severs promised him. Why didn't Severs just tell him to take the cash that was in the house?
You know that there was nearly $50,000 in that home, is that correct?
I found that out later, but no, I didn't know that.
So there was $50,000 when you went down to commit the murder, is that correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
I don't know.
Sustained. Proper.
Mr. Severs never said, I have all this money and I'm going to set it aside for you and you just take it, correct?
Correct.
And then after the murder, you came down again for the funeral, is that correct?
Yes.
Having the mission completed, right?
Yes.
Did you ever get $50,000 in cash at that time?
No, our agreement was it would be paid after he got his life insurance payment.
I don't believe Mark ever gave the go-ahead. But Teresa was worth more alive than dead. Why would he want to give that up?
As Severs watched his best friend testify, the smiles and jokes seemed to be replaced by tears and grief. Was it authentic or a performance for the jury?
For us, it seemed that Mark Severs was not the grieving husband, but just someone who could bring on tears when desired. And so we hoped that the jury would see those tears for what they were, not of those of a grieving husband, but those of a manipulator.
But some of the jurors had been in tears too.
The evidence has shown that Mark Severs hired Curtis Wright, his best friend, to kill his wife, Dr. Teresa Severs. An unconscionable act in light of that sacred contract. So Mr. Wright is a felon. He's an admitted liar. Did you tell us the truth?
Not in the beginning.
He's a killer. I mean, Mr. Severs could ask you to kill his wife and you would actually consider it?
Yes.
By himself, there's no reason why any reasonable person should believe a word he says. But he's corroborated by evidence. Mr. Wright says he came to Florida to kill Dr. Severs with Jimmy Rogers. There's evidence of that. Corroborative evidence. I want you to consider asking why. I want you to keep asking why. She's not a captain of industry. She's not a politician.
Hi, I'm Dr. Teresa Severs.
She's a medical doctor and a mother of 2 and a wife. And she's dead.
Good morning. You've now heard all the evidence. And one question no one's answered. Why? Why? Why is Teresa Severs dead? The best answer we can give you is she is dead because Curtis Wayne Wright killed her. And without Mr. Wright, there is no case. And the crime scene itself, those photos, they're hard to look at. And they're hard to look at because that crime scene is anger, and it's violence, and it's rage, and it's hate. It is not murder for money. Ultimately, the one question you all have to ask yourselves: do you trust Curtis Wayne Wright?
The jury began its deliberations just before lunchtime.
You know, you always hope it'll be fast because of the anxiety and waiting for the verdict.
When the jury goes out, you just say, we did everything we could. We did everything that we reasonably could.
It was only 4 hours later when the judge called everyone back into court.
I've been told we have a verdict. State's ready. Defense is ready. So either side need any time to talk to their sides or their parties, because these things are tough, and I'm not going to have any outbursts. We'll let the clerk publish the verdict.
This was almost the perfect crime.
In the Circuit Court of the 20th Judicial Circuit, in and for Lee County, Florida, criminal action. State of Florida versus Mark D. Severs, case number 15 CF 673B.
Do you trust Curtis Wainwright?
Verdict. We, the jury, find as follows as to the defendant in this case. Count 1, first-degree murder. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. Conspiracy. The defendant is guilty of conspiracy. So say we all, December 4th, 2019, by the foreperson.
He broke down eventually there, but when that verdict was read, he was pretty stoic.
Now the question of how Mark Severs should be punished.
My partner and I were going to have to sit down now and ask this jury to recommend a sentence of death for Mr. Severs.
The jury would have to find the murder was committed for either pecuniary, financial gain, or in a cold, calculated manner, or both. And the jury also had to consider what's called a victim impact statement from Teresa Severs' mother, Mary Ann Groves, who is now allowed to speak publicly of her loss and her grief.
And of course, the biggest loss falls upon her two daughters, whom Teresa loved with all her heart. These two girls have been robbed of their remarkable mother, their home, their pets, their possessions, their family and friends. Teresa will not be able to love and guide them. She won't be there when they graduate high school or when they need their mother to kiss away tears from their first heartbreak. We have lost our Teresa, the light of our lives, the star of our family, who loved us all so fiercely. It has been hard for all of us to go on with our daily lives. The void is unimaginable. She was our strength, our inspiration, and our caretaker.
Only one juror needed to oppose the sentence of death, and the jury was back in just 3 hours. The first question the jury had to answer was the murder committed for financial, pecuniary reasons.
The capital murder was committed for pecuniary gain? No.
Now the question of whether the murder was committed in a cold, calculated manner.
Yes. We, the jury, unanimously find that Mark Severs should be sentenced to death? Yes.
But the judge still had the power to overrule the jury's death sentence, and he revealed something the jury had not been told. Severs' eldest daughter had written a letter asking that her father's life be spared.
The letter essentially said, in not so many words, while I don't want a relationship with my father, if I decide that I might at some time in the future, I can't have that if he is sentenced to death and taken from me.
And then for the first time, the court heard from Mark Severs, defiant and showing no signs of remorse.
Is it okay if I refer to my notes?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Although a jury found me guilty, I am innocent of all charges, as I have maintained since this heinous crime took place. I love my wife, Teresa, and our two daughters, Josie and Carmi, with all my heart. Our girls have tragically lost their mommy, and now they're about to lose their daddy as well. Therefore, I respectfully ask the court for life, as not to compound their loss and suffering. I am grateful, however, that the court can only determine my fate on earth, while my soul is in God's hands, and God knows the truth. Although I cannot feel remorse for something I had absolutely nothing to do with, I am deeply saddened and forever heartbroken, to say the very least, that Teresa was taken from us.
Mark Severs was crying for Mark Severs. He hadn't shed a single tear for Teresa Severs at any time. The only tears Mark Severs ever shed were for Mark Severs.
Teresa is my soulmate. I will miss her and cherish her memories until we are reunited in heaven. Until then, I will fight this wrongful conviction until I am proven innocent and set free to rejoin my family.
Now the judge had to weigh the factors in favor of overturning the jury's decision that Mark Severs should be put to death.
I will note for the record that his children do not want the death penalty imposed, and he was a hands-on, devoted father, and he did help people who were in need.
But it was not enough.
A jury of 12 have found you guilty as charged, so you are guilty. And this is the order of the court that you be sentenced to death, sir.
You feel so terrible for the family. I feel so terrible for the girls because their father orphaned them.
Mark, even if you believe everything they said, did not commit an act of violence. Mark is the only person, Florida's death row right now, who did not commit an act of violence.
To hear the judge say, death penalty, justice is served. He got exactly what he deserved. He got exactly what he deserved.
I judge people's actions. I don't judge people's souls. And if I'm wrong, and hopefully God will have mercy on both of us.
The triple murder made headlines when police believed it was a ritualistic set of killing and the appearance of a rarely seen blue moon.
It's witchcraft. I'll say that right now.
This murder was front page news.
I suffered big time.
The way in which each of the victims were killed was very brutal.
Richard was shot, had a wound to his head. John, whoever did it, and was able to cut his throat. The mom was killed in the same manner. She was hit in the head as well with a hammer, and her throat was also cut.
Richard worked in the crypto department, and of course when you have those high clearances and you don't show up for work, a lot of people get very concerned.
Whoever did this came over there for a specific reason.
Why so much focus on the cigarette butt in the trash? Because it's bad for them. It is beyond a reasonable doubt bad for them.
I'm gonna find out and I'm gonna put your ass in jail.
If you put something out bad, expect bad. That's how it works.
What's the address of your emergency room? Okay, your wife is in a bar. You said she's unresponsive.
This is what he's going to tell you.
How to get out of that situation.
And I grabbed the gun.
Trying to find the first place to put a body.
No, sir.
The only thing they could do was kill him.
You want to say anything? We, the jury, and to find the defendant.
There's 67 counties in Florida. We're the last county in Florida before you cross the state line and you're in the state of Alabama.
We are affectionately known as the Redneck Riviera, and we have the prettiest beaches in the world.
But that's not all Escambia County, Florida is known for.
We unfortunately have witnessed our fair share of odd crimes throughout the years. We've had, the Black Widow murders were here. There's a lady that killed several of her husbands. We had the Billings case where the The family was murdered in the home, and they had 8 special needs children.
We seem to find our way into the paper probably more than we would like.
And it was here that the infamous serial killer Ted Bundy was captured.
He didn't get away from us. We ended up prosecuting him, and of course he was finally put to death. But he's just one in that long string of people that somehow have a tie to Escambia County. We jokingly say that Escambia County is this, Twilight Zone vortex.
And no case fit that description better than what came to be called the Blue Moon Murders, connected to a rare astrological occurrence with historical overtones of witchcraft.
There are some indications of what the motive is.
This murder was front page news.
The media really latched onto the Blue Moon witchcraft murder.
3 members of one family found dead in their modest home.
Initial research has led us to believe that there's a potential that it was a ritualistic killing.
The way in which each of the victims were killed was very brutal.
The time of death, we believe, on Tuesday also coincides with what's referred to as a blue moon. It's witchcraft, I'll say that right now.
The crime scene itself was a puzzle for investigators.
It was kind of a macabre scene. It was so out of the ordinary.
The house was kind of in disarray. They noticed that there were piles of blankets and clothing. Once they kind of lifted the outer edges of those piles of blankets and clothing, in the den area, they observed, a foot. And they also observed a female hand underneath one of the piles.
The body of an elderly woman, Von Seal Smith, and under the other piles of clothing, her 2 adult sons, Richard and John.
Well, whoever had done this had taken time, obviously, to cover the bodies up.
The investigation was led by then Escambia County homicide detective Matt Infinger.
The position of John sitting on the couch, whoever did it walked right up to him, hit him in the head with a hammer, and then was able to cut his throat. He didn't even try and defend himself. So he was either asleep or knew the individual. The mom was killed in the same manner. She was killed in her chair in the living room where she always stayed and watched TV. She was hit in the head as well with a hammer, and her throat was also cut. Richard was shot, had a wound to his head, and his throat was also cut.
And investigators came to learn from neighbors that there was an aura of mystery about the victims themselves, starting with the mother.
She was a woman who apparently never left the house. She ordered from QVC. She'd get 5 and 6 packages a day from QVC. The home was just stuffed with boxes and dresses and all sorts of things that she bought from QVC.
These people, they stayed to themselves. There were neighbors that didn't have any interaction with them.
The older brother, Richard, worked at the Pensacola Naval Air Station for a secretive Homeland Security division, which added to the mystery surrounding the case.
Richard worked in the crypto department. Some of this we really aren't at liberty to talk about, some of the elements of the case, but he worked in the crypto room, which is all the codes that they teach the Navy folks. And of course, when you have those high clearances and you don't show up for work, a lot of people get very concerned.
So certainly one of the things that investigators looked into was whether Richard Smith's job had anything to do with his murder as well as the murder of his family members.
When Richard Smith's body was discovered, his car keys were missing, and there was DNA in one of his front pants pockets that was not identified, which is a pretty strange thing to have happen.
And a full federal investigation was launched to see if some foreign assassin or terrorist was somehow connected to what happened to the family.
There was 2 DHS investigators that worked with me on the case, and we were able to determine that there was nothing that Richard was working on that would lend to this type of thing happening to him.
What the investigators were focused on instead was a man who lived nearby and would later claim to be a follower of a pagan religion called Wicca, people who believe in magic and practice witchcraft, with rituals tied to phases of the moon.
And in his home, he had the altar set up with the dead flowers and the dagger, and he had a pentagram on the floor.
I knew that this wasn't a random homicide because there was no forced entry to the home. So it was like whoever did this came over there for a specific reason, committed these murders, and then tried to conceal it.
And over the next 24 hours, investigators would find themselves fully caught up in what the county sheriff called the Twilight Zone vortex.
The three could have been murdered in a witchcraft ritual based on the timing of the blue moon and the positioning of the victims' bodies.
Well, the way we found out, it was on the news.
The Smith family's out-of-town relatives were horrified as they learned the details of what happened inside this home in Pensacola, Florida.
I try not to think of what they went through that day, because when I do, I break down.
Faye Haas was a cousin to the two dead sons, Richard and John. Von Seal was her aunt, known as Aunt Bonnie.
This is Aunt Bonnie. This is Aunt Bonnie. When I think of what they went through, that's the hard thing. They suffered. They suffered big time.
She had a hard time understanding who would want to kill any of them. John, at the age of 47, had never quite grown up.
That was the hardest, I think, to take because he was so sweet. He was just, and always smiling. He was like a child in a man's body. The special needs.
She says her Aunt Bonnie only became a shut-in after her husband died and her health failed.
My aunt was a good woman, and she was a very good mother. They traveled a lot. I had plenty of pictures of they traveled, and a lot. They were very outgoing before, so they were very active until the illness.
And the eldest son, Richard, took care of both his mother and brother.
A lot of people say, why was he 49 and living at home? Because he was taking care of his mother, and he knew he was going to have to take care of John all his life.
The biggest question on Faye Haas's mind was why Aunt Bonnie's third son, Donald Wayne Hartung, who also lived in Pensacola, had not called.
And I said, Wayne hasn't called us. Why hasn't he called us or tried to get in touch with any of us over here?
That was because Donald Wayne Hartung was at the police station.
Let me start by getting your name and information. What's your first name?
Donald.
What's your middle name, Donald?
Wayne, W-A-Y-N-E. Hartung, H-A-R-T-U-N-G.
The first interview I did with Donald, I was trying to just get a overall picture of the family and what was going on, the family dynamics.
Donald Hartung was 59 years old and worked as a security guard at a local hospital. He told Detective Matt Infinger he had a good relationship with his mother and with stepbrothers John and Richard Smith.
Do you have good relationships with them, or?
Yeah, we have great relationships.
Hartung said he had last been at the house 3 days earlier when he went there to cook dinner, as he does every Tuesday. He had not yet been told how his family died.
Your folks, your family over there was killed?
Killed? They said they were deceased, and they never told me how they were killed.
They're dead, and it looks like they were killed.
Killed?
Mm-hmm.
How were they killed?
It looked like they were shot.
Shot?
Mm-hmm.
How was that?
Well, it looked like they were shot. It's hard to tell because there was a lot of clothes on top of them.
Clothes on top of them?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my God. robbed? Or?
I don't think so.
It just looks like somebody just came in and shot him.
Yeah, it looks like somebody knew him, whoever did it.
Well, I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody that they know.
No.
Could have been anybody.
This was a man who supposedly had just found out that his mother and his two brothers had been murdered. And the fact that he was very kind of nonchalant, he was not emotional whatsoever. He did not cry, he did not seem surprised, he really didn't seem concerned.
And because Hartung was the last person known to see his family alive, he was then asked the big question.
So something didn't happen when you were over there Tuesday night and you killed him?
No. Nothing happened.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Because if something happened, now's the time to tell me.
I would not kill my mother and my brothers.
Okay.
I mean, why would I do something like that?
I don't know. I don't know you.
Well, I understand that. I know that's true. But I wouldn't do something like that. I'd never harm my family.
He was also asked if they could search his home, which again was approximately 3 miles away from where the Smith family lived. He did consent to a search of his home. He did seem cooperative.
And that led to a surprising discovery. Donald Hartung was a practicing member of the Wicca religion, a believer in magic and witchcraft.
Who knows, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, obviously, that was a way for him to justify in his own mind, as to what he was doing.
But that was no surprise to Hartung's family members, who said Hartung's mother, a good Christian lady, had been outraged about Donald's Wiccan beliefs.
And she did not agree with her son doing the Wiccan, and she knew he was doing the Wiccan. It's witchcraft to her. It's devil worship. That's the way my aunt thought about it. And she didn't want her other two sons around him. She was very against it.
That didn't square with what Hartung had told Detective Infriger about his relationship with his mother.
She's all I got.
She was the one that was always there for you.
That's right. She's always there for me. She was always there for me. There ain't nothing in this world I could ask my mother for that she wouldn't give me.
Really?
That's right. Nothing.
But when I spoke with neighbors, other people that knew the victims of the family, it was different than what Donald had told me. The relationships weren't as close as Donald had portrayed the relationships to be. They were more distant. There wasn't a lot of communication within the family. Donald only came over on Tuesdays to cook, and that was about it.
So, well after midnight on the day the bodies were discovered, at about 1:30 in the morning, Donald Hartung was brought back to the sheriff's office.
When something like this happens, you are working 24/7 till you hit a dead end.
All leads pointed to Hartung as the murderer.
And killed your mom?
I did not kill my mother.
And then killed your brother?
I would never kill my mom or my brother. Either one of my brothers. I mean, do I look like some kind of a blooming maniac to you people?
I mean, you do to me.
Could the detective get a confession out of this late-night interrogation? Was the blue moon going to be the key to solving the murders? In the first 24 hours of the investigation, the working theory was that a rare blue moon had led Donald Hartung to kill his family as part of a ritualistic sacrifice connected to the Wiccan religion. That was the theory.
I don't know anything about Wiccan sacrifices. I don't know a thing about anything like that.
And Detective Matt Infriger pounded away on that theory during a post-midnight interrogation of Hartung, who had acknowledged he was a follower of Wicca.
Who knows that you're Wiccan?
Nobody. I'm a solitary practitioner. Nobody knows that I'm a Wiccan.
If you know about the blue moon and all that kind of stuff, you do.
Well, I know about the blue moon. I know it's full moons, but I mean, it's been all over the radio.
Like I was explaining to you about the Wiccan ritual, they cover them to keep them warm after they kill them.
I don't know nothing about no ritual like that.
I mean, who does that?
A crazy person does that.
Only later would Detective Infiger learn that the theory of a blue moon ritual sacrifice was completely at odds with the Wiccan faith.
That is just insanity. There is no such thing as human sacrifice in the religion of Wicca. None. Zero. Zilch.
Susie Smith calls herself a high priestess of the Wiccan religion and is proud to be known as a witch.
I am a witch. I am a witch and I am Wiccan.
She was so upset about what Sheriff Morgan said that she sent him this video demanding he retract his statements.
And for Sheriff Morgan to attach the Wiccan religion to this murder was presumptuous, and he should have checked his facts before he made such accusatory statements. As a high priestess of the community, I have the right to say, yes, you are Wiccan, no, you're not. I want them to know that this man has nothing to do with our community.
But that was well after the sheriff had already made headlines around the world with his blue moon Wiccan theory.
It's witchcraft. I'll say that right now.
The sheriff's information was based, apparently, on a deputy's quick reading of a since-debunked website that deals in witchcraft and conspiracies.
It had no basis in fact, and it was just baffling that the sheriff went off on that tangent. You have to look at the sheriff's theory in the perspective of the day he made his announcement that Donald was a suspect and that it was a Wiccan witchcraft type murder was also when he had his first fundraiser for his re-election campaign. The sheriff made lots of headlines, got a lot of publicity, and effectively helped his campaign considerably.
But for the homicide case, the Blue Moon theory was a rabbit hole that did nothing to further the investigation.
I got calls from all over the United States about it, and I was having to deal with trying to investigate a murder and deal with all this Wicca stuff.
And after pumping Donald Hartung over and over in the early morning hours about his Wiccan belief, Detective Infiger got nowhere, despite repeatedly calling him a killer.
Nobody has seen these people since Tuesday, since you saw them.
I was the last one to see them alive.
Yeah. So how are you going to sit there and tell us that you didn't kill them when you were the last one to see them? They trusted you, and you killed them. They didn't think anything of it. They didn't know it was coming.
I love my parents.
I'm sure you did.
I
but
love
you
my
killed
mom
them.
and my brothers, and I did not kill them. I did not kill them. I would never harm my mother, never hurt my brothers, never.
I never thought Donald was going to confess to the murder when I was interviewing him. He was a little, I'm not going to say arrogant, but he had a confidence about himself that he thought he could outsmart us.
With no confession and no physical evidence or even video surveillance footage to implicate him, Donald Hartung was allowed to go home, to the horror of his relatives who had come for the funeral.
He never cried a tear. He never shed a tear at the funeral, never at the graveside. He scared us because we had went by his house one time and he was standing there. We were sitting at the table and he reached up on top of his refrigerator. He was standing there. He said, well, if I'm a murderer and they're so smart, why didn't they find this? And he slammed a machete on the table where we were sitting.
Now the investigation would depend on the forensics, any fingerprints or DNA found at the scene, a real challenge in this investigation.
It's difficult to make a case when there is a family member involved simply because we knew that Donald Hartung went to the family home on every Tuesday to cook dinner. So the fact that his DNA is going to be there is, a given. But what happened in this case is that his DNA turned up on places where it absolutely should not have been.
On the zipper of his brother Richard's notebook case and on Richard's checkbook. And now that interrogation conducted by Detective Infiger really paid off, as Hartung was asked if he had ever touched any of Richard or RT's belongings.
Well, if it's in the house, I didn't touch it. Okay. Or no matter where it was, I didn't touch it. I don't mess with nothing of RT's.
That definitely jumped out to us, and we had Donald Hartung's DNA on the inside of Richard's belt. And obviously that was a place that his DNA should not have been, because he told law enforcement that he had not seen Richard in either 2 to 3 weeks.
So you said you'd never touched anything of RT's before?
Not Tuesday. RT wasn't there.
But the clincher may have been what was found in the trash can on top of some bloody towels.
And then on top of that was a cigarette butt that had Donald Hartung's DNA. So whoever put that cigarette butt in the trash can or smoked that cigarette butt and placed it on top of the items of cleanup was certainly in the home, at least at the time of the homicides and the time of the cleanups.
That kind of sealed the deal in my mind that Donald was the one who did this.
It took 3 months of work, but the time had come to arrest Donald Hartung for the murder of his family, just a few days before Halloween.
An arrest has been made in a 3-month-old triple murder in Pensacola.
Police say 58-year-old Donald Hartung Jr. murdered his mother and 2 half-brothers using a claw hammer.
And I just broke down and started crying, and I said, "Thank you, Lord. Thank you. Thank you." It was the hardest 3 months I've ever lived, waiting on him to get arrested.
But it would take another 4 years before the case went to trial. And in that time, Hartung's lawyer, Michael Griffith, would uncover evidence that the investigation had its own serious flaws. Flaws that Griffith was prepared to fully exploit in his courtly Southern way.
You certainly have to be aggressive, but you don't have to be a rude horse's ass. This isn't a Jerry Springer show.
Jury selection's begun in a triple murder case linked to witchcraft.
The triple murder made headlines when police believed it was a ritualistic set of killings tied to witchcraft and the appearance of a rarely seen blue moon.
State of Florida plaintiff versus Donald Wayne Hartung, defendant.
But for all the media talk and the headlines about the so-called Blue Moon ritual murders, the prosecution would not make any mention of that in the opening statement.
When we got the case at the state attorney's office, we didn't believe the evidence showed that this was related to Wiccan or sacrifice.
And I knew they weren't going down that rabbit hole. They were too good of lawyers to go down that rabbit hole.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back.
But lead prosecutor Bridget Jensen knew she had to provide the jury with a motive for Donald Hartung in her opening statement.
There will be no question that this defendant is the person who murdered his family. And here is why. Last will and testament of Von Sill Smith, he was excluded. So to be included, all 3 of them had to die.
Members of the jury, I heard Ms. Jensen's opening statement and it was masterful, but it leaves out many of the facts or the lack of facts that you are going to hear.
The biggest problem is juries want to believe the police are right. They want to believe the prosecutors all wear white hats and they wouldn't prosecute a case against an innocent person.
And defense lawyer Michael Griffith was prepared to challenge significant holes in the state's case.
There is no indication of any physical evidence that he committed any of the murders. There was no gun found. There was no blood found at his house. There was nothing to link him in any way to these murders besides his DNA at his mom's house, where he went at least every Tuesday to cook dinner for them. Now, as far as the will is concerned, what the will says that Donald Hartung Jr. is excluded. My client is Donald Hartung Sr. Is that an error in drafting the will, or was it meant to exclude Mr. Hartung's son, Donald Hartung Jr.?
For prosecutors, the 4 years that Donald Hartung awaited trial in the Escambia County Jail gave them a crucial advantage.
Will you state your full name, please?
Marlon Devon Purifoy.
A jailhouse informant who had been housed with Hartung.
Mr. Purifoy had information that he could not have gotten without having conversations with Mr. Hartung.
Now, did there come a time when Mr. Hartung talked about the murder of his family?
Yeah, he told me.
Okay. And did he tell you who killed his mother and 2 brothers?
He said he killed them.
Did he tell you why?
He said he wanted the money because she left him out the will.
Now, did he tell you if the murders was it just something that kind of happened, or was it something he'd been thinking about?
Well, he said he'd been playing it last 3 to 4 years. He said Ouija board made him go overboard, though.
The what? I'm sorry?
A Ouija board.
What about a Ouija board?
He said that really made him do it, made him go overboard.
This is the Ouija board investigators discovered at the home of Donald Hartung, along with other books and symbols of witchcraft.
According to Mr. Purifoy, a lot of other inmates were actually scared of Mr. Hartung.
Why?
They thought he was a witch.
And then Purifoy testified about what Hartung claimed to have done to his mother, Von Seal.
He went to his mother, and then he tortured her so she can tell the combination for the safes and stuff.
You said he tortured her, I'm sorry?
He tortured her.
How?
He cut her left pinky finger so he can tell the combination for the safes and stuff.
Investigators found the safe at the home had been successfully opened.
I knew that the pinky finger was cut. I didn't know how it happened or why. And then when Purifoy stated that Donald had done that torturing his mother, it made sense.
On cross-examination, Purifoy held his own, questioned by Griffith's co-counsel.
Mr. Purifoy, you've been convicted of felony, as you said, 6 or 7 times?
Yes, ma'am.
And a conviction for a crime of dishonesty?
Yes, ma'am.
Juries still tend to put credibility in what these jailhouse snitches say. And I think the reason is juries don't understand that these convicts are con men. They can sell ice water to Eskimos, a lot of them.
It was about the money, because he always liked to brag. Like he's going to go to Miami and stuff, hang out with some girls and stuff.
And you testified earlier that Mr. Hartung was angry because his mother had written Mr. Hartung's son out of the will.
No, written both of them out of the will, him and his son.
Now the defense took over, focused on undercutting the handling of the crime scene forensics.
I think it was a very sloppy investigation for a murder case.
The defense brought out that the lead crime scene technician who collected the DNA, Christine Rollins, had since been fired and was being prosecuted for stealing drugs from the evidence room.
So with the 24 felony counts you were charged with, you were facing potentially 170 years in prison, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, what happens when the hammer hits?
And the state's medical examiner had since resigned after allegations she had misused state money.
We've got a medical examiner playing funny with money. She quits her job because of it. We've got a crime scene tech who stole drugs from the evidence room and got in trouble herself. The jury has to believe these people. Who do you believe?
No one. I believe no one.
All leading to a challenge of the time of death, the day when the prosecution said the victims had been killed. The bodies were discovered on a Friday, July 31st. But the investigators concluded the murders had taken place 3 days earlier, on Tuesday the 28th, the day Hartung was seen by a neighbor arriving at the home and leaving later than usual.
Early afternoon, I saw Mr. Hartung arrive, and then later on I saw RT come home, and then I saw Mr. Hartung leave.
Now, was it normal or abnormal to see RT come home while Hartung was still at the house?
It was not usual. Usually Mr. Hartung was gone before RT came home.
And RT's, Richard Smith's, body was found wearing the same clothes seen on him in this surveillance video when he left work that Tuesday, adding to the evidence he was killed that Tuesday night. But a defense medical expert,
I'm Dr. Jonathan Arden,
called that into serious question, saying the victims could not have been killed on Tuesday the 28th, as the prosecutors said. Based on their body heat and rigor mortis level when they were discovered, the doctor said they were killed no sooner than Wednesday the 29th.
Late on the 29th?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this is scientific, correct?
Yes, it is based on science.
There's no way that those people were murdered any time earlier than Wednesday. So all of the scientific evidence was with the defense. It couldn't have been Donald, so that's why the time of death was so important in this case.
And even the prosecutors acknowledged that Dr. Arden's testimony was a serious challenge to their case.
He's amazing, he's intelligent, he's been doing this for a long time. And when you look at the scientific factors, it certainly looked like the murders were committed after Tuesday.
If the jury accepted the science that the murders were committed at least a day after Donald Hartung left the house, that would be more than enough for a reasonable doubt and a verdict of not guilty.
All right, members of the jury, both the state and defense have now rested their case. The attorneys now will present their final arguments.
Ladies and gentlemen.
The difficult part of the case is that it was, 98% circumstantial. Jurors want forensics. They want eyewitnesses. We didn't have any of that.
The best the prosecution had was this surveillance video of Richard Hartung at work on that Tuesday evening.
He is wearing the exact same thing when his body is found on Friday the 31st. What does that tell you? He was murdered right when he got home from work.
And while the prosecution had dismissed the Blue Moon murder theory as a motive, Jensen did address the informant's testimony about Hartung and the occult.
Mr. Purefoy told you that this defendant said that although he had been planning it for this number of years, the Ouija board is what made the defendant do it.
The Ouija board made him go overboard, though.
The what? I'm sorry?
A Ouija board.
People were scared of him. They thought he was a witch.
In the end, the prosecution's strongest evidence was the discovery of Hartung's DNA on his brother's checkbook, his belt, and those telltale cigarette butts, including the one in the trash.
Why so much focus on the cigarette butt in the trash? Because it's bad for them. It is beyond a reasonable doubt bad for them. And the whole point is this: it shouldn't be there. It is smack dab in the middle of cleanup of cooking and murder.
But throughout the trial, family members said Hartung seemed unfazed about the evidence against him.
Several times he would turn around and look at us. Several times he would turn around and smile, like a smirk, like I'm gonna get out of this.
May it please the court, members of the prosecution, members of the jury.
You need to know your juries. You can't come across as some hotshot TV lawyer.
But Michael Griffith did not hesitate to call into question the tactics used against his client in those two interrogations by Detective Matt Infinger.
Well, I promise you this, I'm going to find out.
I know
and
you will,
if you
sir.
did it, I'm going to find out and I'm going to put your ass in jail.
He was brutal to Mr. Hartung, trying to break him down after learning that his family had been murdered.
And Griffith questioned why the prosecution even played the clip showing Hartung being questioned about the later debunked Blue Moon Wiccan theory.
I was explaining to you about the Wiccan ritual. They cover them to keep them warm after they kill them.
I don't know nothing about no ritual like that.
If the state wasn't relying on this Wiccan killing theory, why did they show it to you? Why did they introduce it? They didn't have to introduce it. I suggest to you they put it in to try to offend you, get you upset.
I'm going to object. There's absolutely no evidence of that.
Approach, counsel. Members of the jury, you're to disregard any prior reference to the state's motivation.
And then the biggest hurdle for the defense, the DNA evidence.
Could Richard have left his checkbook at home on the dining table and Donald moved it one day and gotten his DNA all over it? Sure he could have. The fact that his DNA is on that checkbook doesn't mean that he's a killer.
As the jurors left to begin their deliberations, some of them gave Hartung a close look, and he seemed to have returned the looks too.
And he was smiling at them. He's creeping the jury out. They were scared. The women were looking at him like, what is wrong with him? You know, why is he smiling at us?
The jury was out for 4 hours.
All right, members of the jury, it's my understanding you've reached a verdict. Have you reached a verdict?
In the Circuit Court in and for Escambia County, Florida, State of Florida plaintiff versus Donald Wayne Hartung, defendant. We, the jury, find the defendant, Donald Hartung, guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment.
When they said guilty, I was just crying, just holding my head down. Finally, it took 4.5 years to get here. So long.
Donald Hartung showed no emotion, but the smile was gone.
Very disappointed, stoic as he is, but very, very disappointed.
And now, the state moved to impose the death penalty on Hartung on a day that would provide no shortage of surprises as Hartung jumped up to speak.
Your Honor, I would like to respectfully ask for a mistrial.
Hartung then turned on his own lawyers in an hour-long rant, saying his lawyers were incompetent and one had disrespected him when he asked her a question.
Mrs. Wilson replied, after I asked her opinion, she said, "You're a stupid asshole." I said, "What? What did you say?" And Mrs. Wilson said, "I said you're a stupid asshole."
He wanted his lawyers fired.
I'm a $10 hour security guard, Your Honor. I couldn't possibly be expected to go up against 4 seasoned attorneys. I was duped and I was tricked, and I'm willing to admit it, and so were you.
But Judge Danheiser rejected Hartung's argument. And so now the jury was asked to decide whether Donald Hartung should be put to death in a Florida state prison for the murders he was found guilty of committing.
All right, Madam Courtroom, my understanding you reached a verdict, is that correct?
We have, Your Honor.
And then the second surprise of the day. Had the state proved Donald Hartung should be put to death for each victim?
As to count 1, Fonseal Smith, no. As to count 2, John Smith, no. As to the count 3, Richard Smith, no.
A major victory for the defense. Prosecutors could only speculate that Hartung's aged, unhealthy appearance may have swayed some of the jurors.
So maybe some of them would have thought that maybe it was just a lost cause, that, you know, he's probably going to die in prison, you know, in a short amount of time, and so what use is the death penalty at that point?
The lawyers he wanted fired had kept him off death row.
You don't know what juries say, what they think. We may have raised enough issues on the scientific evidence that the jury, although they found him guilty, had enough doubt that they weren't going to execute.
But members of Hartung's family in the courtroom said they could tell he was hardly celebrating.
He's miserable. He deserves to be miserable. When it first happened, I hated him. I wanted him to suffer. I had to work through forgiveness to forgive him. And I do forgive him, but I will never forget what he did.
So if you put something out good, expect good. If you put something out bad, expect bad. That's how it works.
Evil. Just pure evil.
They had a young son together, and they were kind of looking forward to a night out.
There's surveillance video of her inside the bar as well as outside, and it's at that point where she gets up and exits the patio and is last seen leaving towards the west.
Brown County 911, what is the address for your emergency?
We just found a human body laying in the street.
Okay.
We don't know where she is or whatever.
We have an explosive new trial for you out of Wisconsin.
This is the most brutal murder that has ever been committed by one person in the history of Brown County.
Doug murdered Nicole in a fit of jealousy and anger, fueled by insecurity, alcohol, and numerous other drugs.
You knew all along what happened to Nikki.
No, I did not.
All Nikki wanted was a ride home. A ride home. That's her baby.
Your wife is in a bar. You said she's unresponsive.
This is what he's going to tell you.
How to get out of that situation.
And I grabbed the gun.
Trying to find the first place to put a body.
No, sir.
The only thing they could do was kill him.
You want to say anything? We, the jury, and to find the defendant.
Friday, Saturday nights, a good nighttime party life here in downtown Green Bay.
And on this warm spring night, the action is at a place called the Watering Hole.
It's a friendly atmosphere, but it's really large. A lot of people can fit inside.
Somewhere among the hundreds of people dancing and rocking out with a band from California, the Steel Pants, a young woman who would not live to see the dawn of the next day. Her name was Nicole Vanderheiden, Nikki, at the concert with her live-in boyfriend, Doug.
They had a young son together, and they were kind of looking forward to a night out, and it started off really well from what we know.
But both of them were drinking heavily, police would later say, especially Nikki.
Plus, she was breastfeeding. She had a young son, so her tolerance probably wasn't what it used to be.
When the concert ends, Nikki and friends head to another bar, the Sardine Can, with Doug saying he will catch up shortly.
There's surveillance video of her inside the bar as well as outside. She can be seen on the video dancing, having a good time.
But still, no Doug.
And we know that there were text messages between her and Doug accusing him of staying behind, maybe talking to other women.
Nicole was starting to get irritated and upset with Doug because here she is with all of Doug's friends and she doesn't know them very well. And her boyfriend, who she wanted to spend the night with, is not there. Eventually they move outside to an outside patio area, and it's at that point where she gets up and exits the patio and is last seen leaving towards the west.
A friend tried to stop her and confront her, but just couldn't get her to stop or listen, and she just kind of kept walking down the road by herself.
What happened next would not soon be forgotten in this small city in the American Midwest.
Brown County 911, what is the address for your emergency?
We just found a human body laying in the street.
Okay. Person beyond help, or do I need to give you
Yes.
instructions for CPR?
No, it's beyond help. It's starting
Is
to
it
decay.
is it a male or a female?
It's got long hair, but I didn't go near it.
You couldn't even tell who it was. Her face was completely black and blue. She had more than 240 injuries from what had happened.
The only articles of clothing that were left on her body was a sock on each foot, and then there was like a pinkish colored bracelet that you'd get from like an event on one of her wrists.
Brown County Public Safety, this is Teresa.
It was 3 hours later when another call came in to 911.
Yes. How do I go about, missing persons?
It was Nikki's boyfriend, Doug.
Okay, and who's missing?
It's my girlfriend, and she does live with me, and she's never done this before.
What's her name?
Nicole Vanderheiden.
Now, Detective Brian Slinger had a name for the victim and a name for a likely suspect.
And what's your name?
Doug Dietrich.
They had already found the body, and here they have someone calling saying that they can't find their girlfriend.
Obviously, there were some things that were concerning to us. Why did you wait so long to make this phone call, especially when you have a newborn baby at the house that needs mother's attention?
So it kind of painted a picture that maybe Doug had done this.
An officer was dispatched to Doug Dietrich's home.
I'm here for a missing persons report.
We used a audio-video recording device to record it so that we could get a look at him. We focused on his hands, we focused on the general condition of his body, focused on the condition of his house, his behaviors.
Dietrich was not told about the discovery of a body just 3 miles away.
Do you suspect any foul play? If so, why?
I don't know. I don't suspect it, but this the area she walked in, definitely don't like.
Okay.
His story was he went to bed, woke up once or twice through the night to use the bathroom and to take care of the baby, and woke up the next morning, 10, 11 o'clock, somewhere in there, and she still wasn't home.
Dietrich had not called in the missing person report until 4 in the afternoon.
I'd be lying if I said we weren't alarmed with his level of concern. The level of concern did not seem to match what it should be, I guess.
So that night, detectives got a warrant to search the home Doug and Nikki shared.
It's probably the first person you look to, the boyfriend, the fact that there was a falling out that night. Mr. Dietrich obviously was a person of interest right away.
And Dietrich was brought to the sheriff's office for what would be a grueling 3-hour late-night interrogation. The detectives, Brian Slinger and Lee Kingston, wanted to know why Doug had waited so long to call in the missing persons report.
I wasn't feeling good all day. I was hungover and feeling like shit, and then not wondering. I was thinking she went off with another guy, whatever. All this shit going through my mind.
After about 2 hours, the detectives finally tell Dietrich about the body found in the nearby farm field.
I don't think it's been 100% identified as her, but there's a lot of similarities. What do you mean a lot of similarities? It's a physical description. Height, blonde, belly button ring.
They are watching him closely to see his reaction before asking him, essentially, if he killed her.
And you don't know where she is or what happened to her? Not a clue. Did you do anything that caused her to go missing? No, not at all. Besides being an asshole a little bit on the phone,
Now, the detectives raise the stakes, telling Doug Dietrich they want the clothes he was wearing that night when he was out with Nikki, and that they are already searching his house for evidence of a murder.
Is there anything in when they go search your house, is they're going to find anything in their house they're going to find that's going to say you had anything to do? Absolutely nothing whatsoever. Nothing. I have nothing to do with this.
For the next half hour, as the detectives watch, Doug Dietrich sobs almost uncontrollably, at one point saying he is scared.
Just try to relax. Take some breaths. You're scared? I want her back. She needs to go back. I need help.
Were they the tears of a grieving boyfriend? The tears of someone who was scared he has been caught.
Every last resource. I will find them, Nikki. I will find them. I love you. I love you. I loved you. I really did.
Green Bay, Wisconsin is all about its football team, the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, pretty much anywhere you go around here, it's Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, if you don't love the Packers, you might get booted out. It's green and gold here for days and days and days.
But the stadium was empty. The football season had not yet started. On the spring weekend, Nikki Vanderheiden was killed. And so her brutal murder was all anyone talked about.
Many people said, how can such a brutal crime take place in Green Bay, Wisconsin? How can somebody commit such a random act in our community?
Not in my backyard,
It was very scary. I mean, can't think of anything worse. A random attack like that on a young lady at bar close, in a small 100,000 person community. And
the shock of Nicole Vanderheinen's death was felt throughout this family-friendly city.
By all accounts, she was a very good teacher, and she was an excellent mother, a smiler, somebody who they said would light up a room.
Nikki was the mother of 3, 2 from a previous marriage, and the third, 6-month-old Dylan, with her live-in boyfriend, Doug Dietrich.
She really cared about her kids and would never have done anything to put them in harm's way or in jeopardy or to leave them alone.
The first big break in the case came with a call from 2 joggers out for a morning run, coincidentally caught on a student driver's dashboard camera.
We were out jogging that morning at about 5:30, and we had to jump over a pool of blood in the road. And if you look close on the right-hand side, you can see where the blood and stuff is.
And then a neighbor found more of the grisly evidence on his lawn, including a wire cord he had run over with his lawnmower.
That's absolutely where the murder took place. The blood that was collected there, the hair samples, and then that cord that was found, which we believe is like a phone charging cord, came back all positive with Nicole Vanderheiden's blood DNA.
And then detectives began to hear from Nikki's friends and relatives that Doug had been abusive to Nikki.
She's been very depressed lately. Why has she been depressed?
Her sister Heather said Doug drank heavily and used cocaine.
And then my mom said that 2 weeks ago she told her that he has been beating her. She asked, has he ever hit you? And she said, yeah. And my mom said, you need to come away with me, you're going to Golden Pump. And she didn't.
And one of Doug's former girlfriends, Rebecca Mott, came forward to tell detectives how Doug could be jealous and often violent.
We got in a fight, he tackled me, and I broke my ankle. He would, throw stuff, break stuff, and I would too.
He wasn't the most stand-up citizen or the best boyfriend by any means.
And now the search warrant at Doug's home began to produce results.
Nicole had some significant prints on her back that appeared to be a shoe, which is like a herringbone pattern that's common on the bottom of Air Jordan or Nike Jordan shoes. We located a pair of shoes in Mr. Dietrich's garage that had that similar pattern on them, that also had some red staining, red drops on the bottom of them that we figured was consistent with blood.
And inside of Nikki's car, parked in the garage, was what appeared to be blood splatter, blood drops in the back seat.
We were pretty confident at that time that Doug was responsible. Our theory at the time was that somehow Nicole got home, there was a disturbance or some sort of disagreement out in the street or in the driveway, and then the theory was that Doug used her vehicle, which was in the garage, to transport the body.
At 7:03 p.m., attempting contact with Doug Dietrich. What's the address?
Less than 72 hours after Nikki's body had been discovered, Detective Brian Slinger was on his way to Doug Dietrich's house to arrest him for murder.
We'll talk down there and I'll kind of explain to you what's going on.
He was he was emotional. He had the chance to speak to a family attorney prior to his arrest, so there was no interview after his arrest. He was just transported to the jail.
Doug Dietrich's arrest for the murder of his girlfriend sent another shockwave through Green Bay.
He comes from a pretty well-off family here in the area. He had a pretty good life, and so people just thought he was kind of, a rich kid, kind of getting away with what he wanted.
Dietrich had no alibi for his whereabouts that fateful night when Nikki walked off into the darkness. And the friend who was with him that night, Greg Matthew, appeared to the detectives to be evasive about Doug's movements.
Because I'm going to tell you that there's no doubt in anybody's mind that the evidence shows that your friend Doug had involvement in her murder. There's no doubt about it, okay?
And the friend became upset when detectives asked him about Doug's whereabouts in the hour before the babysitter, Dallas, said Doug had returned home.
Who can vouch for you for the 60 minutes before you showed up and made contact with Dallas? Who can vouch you for that? What is this 60 minutes? 1 hour. I'm asking for a 1 hour period of time. Who can vouch for where you were if your phone is dead? Thank you, guys. So nobody. That's your alibi? Nobody. That's your alibi. Your alibi is the guy that's in custody for murder.
The evidence against Doug Dietrich was building, but the case was about to take another dramatic turn, all because of something the detectives saw on this body cam video of Doug Dietrich when he first reported Nikki missing.
Breaking news on the case of the Brown County woman whose body was found in a farm field.
16 days after he'd been arrested for the murder of his girlfriend Nikki, Doug Dietrich was released from jail.
Doug, how do you feel?
He's not gonna have any comment. People were really shocked and were like, what are police doing? How can they let a murderer go when we know, or we thought we knew, that he was the one that did it?
But behind the scenes, the case against him had completely fallen apart.
A lot of what changed was we were getting evidence back from the crime lab. There's a lack of physical evidence tying Doug to her body, to her clothing.
The blood found on his Air Jordan shoes was not that of Nikki Vanderheiden, but that of a turkey.
Who would have known he would have went turkey hunting a week or two prior and there'd be turkey blood in the garage.
The blood found in Nikki's car wasn't hers, but that of her daughter. And the vehicle couldn't have been used to move the body, as police first theorized.
We're able to find out that that car did not move that entire weekend.
And then the clincher.
We went back and looked at the videos, and we had noticed that Mr. Dietrich was wearing his Fitbit the day that we interviewed him at the house when he called in the missing person. We started thinking about, can we get the data off that Fitbit to show was he moving around that night?
The device was turned over to crime technician Tyler Bailey.
A Fitbit is an activity tracker that you wear on your wrist, similar to a watch or a bracelet. There was a short amount of steps recorded in the middle of the night, consistent with, someone getting up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. And then after that, there was another period where there was no movement recorded from the Fitbit.
Doug Dietrich's Fitbit confirmed his alibi.
And there was no way he would have gotten up in the middle of the night, went out into the front yard, committed a brutal murder, drove a couple miles away, and then came back home.
Detective Brian Slinger had worked hard to destroy his own case and clear Doug Dietrich of the crime, but still felt bad about first arresting an innocent man for murder.
He missed the funeral, he missed certain things, he was painted as this, and I think, anyone would be lying or if they said they didn't feel slightly bad about it.
Okay, well then who do they think did this? Is this person still out there? Are they in the community? I think it was pretty scary for people living in that area too to realize that, okay, if Doug didn't do it, who did and where is this person?
And the key was to find whoever met up with Nikki Vanderheiden sometime after she walked away from this downtown bar and then killed him. Police didn't have a clue.
We reenacted it numerous times, we walked the path, and she kind of walked off into darkness, and that's kind of where we were at.
It would be 2 full months before a breakthrough.
Got a call from the crime lab telling me that they were able to get enough DNA off of one of the socks, of all things, from her body to enter it into the CODIS system.
The CODIS system is a nationwide registry of DNA collected by the FBI. Anyone who has ever been arrested will be in there.
And they got a hit from the state of Virginia for George Stephen Birch.
George Stephen Birch had been arrested in Norfolk, Virginia in 2001 for murder, but was acquitted at trial. He had 5 other criminal convictions and was on probation for one of them, requiring him to stay in Virginia.
I'm thinking, is this a transient? Is this a truck driver that may have been in the area for the weekend? How is someone from Virginia's DNA showing up in Green Bay?
What the investigators did not know was that George Birch had been living in Green Bay for some 3 months, in this house, the home of Linda and Edward Jackson.
I met him a long time ago back in upstate New York. Him and his wife were separating, and he knew I was doing very well out here, so he asked me if he could come out and get a fresh start.
He was extremely polite. He called me Miss Linda, and I kind of liked that. Just very personable, very, very personable.
Birch was a regular at a bar 3 blocks away from the Jackson home, a place called Richard Cranium's.
He was so fun-loving, you know. Everybody at Richard Cranium's called him Big Country, and he was 6'8", tall guy, but very friendly.
He was always, I guess you'd say, very charming towards the girls. He had no problem with walking up to any girl and just talking with them and striking up a conversation.
The Jacksons say they had no idea the man staying in their home was being sought in the Nikki Vander Heyden murder investigation. In fact, Ed Jackson and George Birch had gone fishing the very day her body was discovered.
Oh, he was real happy. He had a big smile on his face and holding it up. And that picture actually played a big part in it also, because when you focus in on it and you look at his right hand, you can see the cuts on his knuckles.
But detectives only learned that Birch was in Green Bay after he seemingly outsmarted himself.
We had no contact with him with the Sheriff's Department. However, Green Bay Police Department did have one contact with him from right around that time frame.
It was from a minor hit-and-run traffic accident involving a Chevy Blazer that belonged to the Jacksons. When the vehicle was found, the front seat had been set on fire. It was the same vehicle Birch drove the night of the murder.
And at that point, the Jacksons called in for a stolen vehicle. And the last person to use that vehicle was George Birch. And he said that, oh, I must have left the keys in the car. Somebody must have stolen it.
But now George Birch's name was in the police department database, along with his address.
So I jumped in my car and ran out to that house, and there he is, standing on the porch smoking a cigarette.
And even better, he had given his cell phone to the police to clear his name in the earlier investigation.
It basically mapped out his night and gave us a lot of the answers that we needed to have.
The GPS app from the phone showed Birch spent most of the night at his favorite haunt, Richard Cranium's, where detectives believe he met Nikki Vander Heyden.
She was just looking for a ride home, and then he ended up bringing her home and sexually assaulting her in front of her residence. She's inside of a vehicle, fell out the passenger side onto the ground, which is where he proceeded to curb stomp her, or stomp her head into the ground, stomp her back into the ground, which is how the footprints would have gotten, shoe prints would have gotten on her back. And then the phone moved and went directly from Nicole's residence to the scene where the body was located. So his phone showed him at every single crime scene location and basically mapped out that night for us.
Now authorities were sure they finally had the right person who had taken Nikki off the quiet streets of Green Bay and killed her.
Breaking news out of Green Bay today. 38-year-old George Birch was arrested this morning for the murder of Nicole Vander Heyden. Investigators say Birch has been tied to the scene of the crime with forensic evidence.
George, must be up for me. I'm just going to take the package one more time and I'll see if we can handcuffs up for you.
But George Birch was a cool customer, showing little emotion once he was in custody. At 6'8", 270 pounds, towering over Detective Brian Slinger as his handcuffs were removed.
I told him that he was under the arrest for the murder of Nicole Vander Heyden, and I wanted to speak to him about that. His face didn't change one bit.
Okay, so is this something that you want to talk to me about? Sir? What's that? You don't want to talk to me about that? So if I read your Miranda rights, you don't want to talk to me? So I would prefer a lawyer. Okay.
But once at trial, George Birch would have plenty to say, offering a version of the night that would turn the trial into a real whodunit.
George, did you murder Nicole Vander Heyden?
No, sir. Definitely not.
You know who did?
Doug Dietrich.
Now both men would be on trial.
We have an explosive new trial for you out of Wisconsin. It's taken the nation and all media outlets by storm.
Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen.
It was 40-year-old George Birch who was on trial for the murder that had shocked the city of Green Bay, Wisconsin.
That a violent, ruthless killer could do
what we believe the evidence will show Mr. Birch did to Nikki Vanderheiden.
But the lawyers for George Birch sought to turn the tables on the prosecution case.
The defense came out swinging. We're gonna show you how horrible Douglas Dietrich is.
Telling the jury it was Nikki's boyfriend, Doug Dietrich, not George Birch, who had the motive to kill her, just as investigators had first believed.
Doug murdered Nicole in a fit of jealousy and anger, fueled by insecurity, alcohol, and numerous other drugs. The evidence is going to show you Doug did this. At the very least, it's going to give you significant doubt about whether or not George did this.
And so, for 2 full days, Doug Dietrich was on the witness stand, once again having to defend himself.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Prosecutor David Lassay took him through what happened the night of the concert. The couple drinking and dancing and happy, leading up to a dramatic moment.
Doug, when was the last time that you personally saw Nikki alive?
It was going to the bathroom, see you in 10 minutes, whatever, And that's the last time I saw her.
The prosecutor paused to let Doug Dietrich's emotion play out. From the bench, Judge John Sikowski, a former district attorney himself, appreciated what the prosecution was trying to do to overcome a major challenge.
It would be the fact that Dietrich was originally arrested. He would have had more of a motive. He would have been a likely suspect.
Did you have absolutely any involvement in Nikki's disappearance or death?
No, I did not.
Thank you. No further questions at this time.
But the cross-examination of Doug Dietrich would be aggressive and brutal, starting with text messages he had sent to his mother just before the night that he felt trapped by Nikki.
I don't recall that that conversation.
How about when you told her, I'm very seriously thinking about telling Nikki and the kids they have to move. I'm not cut out for this life one bit. Do you remember that?
I remember, I think I sent something on the lines of that, and I was having a little downer day or whatever, and I just said that to my mom with not truly meaning it, I guess.
Did you often say things you didn't mean to your mom?
I mean, yeah, sometimes I would, yeah. I mean, it is my mom. I'm very close to her, and
So since you're close to your mom, that means you lie to your mom?
No, I didn't say I would lie. I mean, maybe sometimes, but...
And then to the text messages Nikki sent to him that night when he had not showed up.
Did you hurt Nikki that night?
Do you mean physically or what? No, I mean...
Did you physically beat her in the past?
No, I never physically beat Nikki.
So you just have no idea why she would say these things?
Exactly.
With Doug Dietrich back on the stand for day 3, the cross-examination turned to why he had waited so long to call friends or family or police when he woke up early the next morning and Nikki wasn't there, suggesting he already knew she was dead because he killed her.
Did you search for Nikki on foot or by vehicle?
No, I did not.
Still didn't call the police?
I did not at that time, no.
Because you knew you didn't have to.
And now boring in on his actions when police did arrive.
And then you made sure that before police arrived, you took a shower.
Yeah, yep. I mean, I was feeling grubby and,
You wanted to
needed
hide
to wake up and...
You wanted to hide any proof that you were involved in her murder, so you took a shower before the police came.
And then a final stab to make sure the jury knew that police, too, had at first believed Doug Dietrich killed Nikki.
They knew she was murdered 118 feet from your house.
I don't know what they knew at that point.
You knew all along what happened to Nikki.
No, I did not.
That's when the Brown County Sheriff's Office arrested you and told you you were under arrest for the murder of Nicole Vanderheiden.
That is correct.
I have no further questions.
The defense had planted its seeds of doubt.
Look, it's a classic jilted lover gets vengeance story. Yeah. It's classic. It's as old as time itself, this story.
But the defense still had to find a way to deal with the overwhelming forensic evidence against George Birch, including his DNA on Nicky's sock and the GPS data pings on his phone showing his travels to and from the crime scene.
The evidence that the state clearly presented was difficult to overcome that.
And so it was no surprise when his lawyers called George Birch to testify.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am. Given the situation here, especially given the scientific evidence, Birch almost had to testify. And I think what he had to try to do was fashion a story that would somehow explain away the physical and scientific evidence.
He wore a tie and tried to come across as a gentle giant.
George Birch on the stand, sometimes he seemed likable.
But sheriff's deputies were concerned that Birch was no likable, gentle giant.
Birch is wearing a stun belt underneath his clothes so that it's controlled by remote control. They can provide an electric shock to him in case he acts out in the courtroom.
Hey, George.
How you doing?
Good. You've been sitting here for a long time.
Yes, sir.
Probably have a lot you want to explain to the jury.
Yes, sir.
Birch described meeting Nicky at his regular hangout, Richard Cranium's.
I was flirting.
And how was she acting towards you?
Somewhat the same, pretty much. Flirting back and forth with each other.
Birch said they left together and ended up outside her house, where he says they had sex in the back of a Chevy Blazer before someone attacked both him and Nicky.
The next thing I remember was the person behind me had been saying, the first thing I was coherent to me that I could hear them say was, "Look what the you made me do."
Did you know if she was alive or dead at that point?
I didn't know if she was alive. There was a lot of blood on her face, come out of her mouth, on her back.
And again, at that point, did you know who that individual was?
Never seen him before in my life.
Do you know who that individual is now?
Now I do.
Who was it?
It was Doug Dietrich.
And he said Dietrich then ordered him at gunpoint to put Nicky's lifeless body in his Blazer and drop it in a nearby farm field.
What was Dietrich doing at this point?
He was standing behind me with he still had the firearm in his hands, pretty much directing me what to do.
Birch's testimony, if the jury believed it, would explain perfectly why his DNA was on Nicky's sock, why his phone GPS data showed him at the crime scene and at the farm field.
George, did you murder Nicole Vanderheiden?
No, sir. Definitely not.
Do you know who did?
Doug Dietrich.
The final day of the trial was being televised live, locally and nationally.
We're going to be covering the George Birch case today. There's a lot at stake with this story.
So many twists and turns. People were so intrigued by it because they didn't think that this could happen in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
And Nicole's family and Doug Dietrich and his family were in the courtroom for what would be the dramatic high point.
Cross-examination.
The cross-examination of George Birch by prosecutor David Lassay.
What really happened was you drove Nicole home 20 miles away from where you lived, fully expecting that you were going to have sex, right? That was your expectation. You were going to have sex. That's why you're driving her home, right?
I was hoping that we would. It was leading from what had happened before and where we had spoken. It seemed like that's what was going to happen.
When you get there, and it becomes clear that Nikki isn't going to have sex with you, when she attempts to go into her house and leave your vehicle, that's when your mood changes, right?
No, sir.
That's when things get aggressive, don't they?
Not at all.
That's when you grab that cord and strangle her, don't you?
No, sir, not at all.
That's when Nikki gets slammed on the ground repeatedly when she's trying to run toward her house, when those bloodstains lead in the direction back to her home.
None of that is true.
Well, how do you know? You were out cold when Nikki was assaulted.
Because you said I did it.
And the next day, you're going fishing with your buddy with a smile on your face and not a care in the world.
It was a pre-planned event, sir, and I wouldn't say not a care in the world. That definitely would not be something I would say.
No further questions.
It had been almost 2 years since that spring night when Nicole Vanderheiden and her boyfriend Doug were at the Steel Panthers concert. Since she sent the angry text to Doug. Since she walked off into the night. Since Doug was arrested for murder, then released when his Fitbit gave him an alibi. And since authorities tracked down George Stephen Birch after finding his DNA on Nikki's sock and on a wire cord used to strangle. The case was about to go to a jury that would have to decide whose story to believe, that of Doug Dietrich.
Did you have absolutely any involvement in Nikki's disappearance or death?
No, I did not.
Or that of George Birch.
George, did you murder Nicole Vanderheiden?
No, sir. Definitely not.
Prosecutor Mary Kerrigan Maris presented the state's closing argument.
This is clearly a whodunit case.
Ridiculing the defense's case.
Their explanation is ridiculous and it's insulting to your intelligence. He tries to make you believe this encounter was consensual as far as sexual activity. Killing her is not enough. He seeks to defame her. Her life's gone, so let's go after her reputation. She's not here to counter these outrageous claims. That's very convenient for him. Nikki did not give up easily. She showed her spirit through the end. Nikki did not go gently into the night. We ask you to return a verdict of guilty for first-degree intentional homicide. Thank you.
In his closing argument, George Birch's lawyer, Lee Chuchart, did not back down from pointing the finger at Doug Dietrich.
Justice for Nicole is not going to be delivered by a wrongful conviction of George Birch. Just because a story sounds ridiculous or sounds unbelievable doesn't mean it is. And I ask that you focus on all the evidence in this case, that you don't continuously ignore that the state arrested Doug Dietrich and there's a full-scale investigation into Doug Dietrich. We've seen the evidence. We've seen him testify. He had the motive, the opportunity, and the connection to this crime. The first piece of evidence I ask that you focus on is when Doug Dietrich actually called the police.
Yes. How do I go about, this missing person?
He didn't call the police until after Nikki's body was found. He knew why. He didn't want the police to come. He was trying to cover up what he did. As we sit here right now, you are literally surrounded by doubt. You are surrounded by reasonable doubt. That's why you must return a verdict of not guilty.
Both sides expected the jury would need several days to review all the evidence and conflicting testimony.
They got the case this afternoon after closing arguments from both sides, and we're waiting to see exactly how long they're going to deliberate today.
Very unusual dynamic in the sense that it's not just did this one do it, it's which of the two did it.
The jury was back after only 3 hours.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we've been advised that you've reached a verdict. Is that correct? The verdict reads as follows. We, the jury, find the defendant, George Stephen Birch, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide, is charged in the information.
He just hung his head a little bit, but I don't remember him crying or showing much emotion.
And jurors told reporters it had all come down to exhibit number 23, that piece of wire cord almost thrown away after being run over by a neighbor's lawnmower.
They said, That is what sealed the deal for them, because Doug's DNA was not found on that wire, but Nicole Vanderheiden's was, and so was George Birch's.
For an emotional 2 hours, Judge John Sikowski heard from Nikki's friends and family and from Doug Dietrich's mother, Diane.
I have a hard time driving on Hoffman Road. The site where Birch threw Nikki away like she didn't even matter. She did matter. We loved her and we missed her. All Nikki wanted from him was a ride home. A ride home. Back to Doug, back to her baby. In closing, please go home today. Hug your loved ones. Tell them you love them. Show them you love them.
Nobody came to court to speak for George Birch, and now, wearing his orange prison jumpsuit, he declined to speak for himself.
No, sir, Your Honor.
You know, I just a thought, Mr. Birch. He said yes, sir, and no, sir. The manly thing would have been to say, I did it, I flipped out, I did whatever. Cop will plea, do something, and step up to the plate, and he chose not to do that. And still haven't done that.
And then, just before passing sentence, the judge had one final comment about George Birch's behavior.
Drop the body off in a field, and then 12 hours later go on a boat and be smiling like nothing happened. Like you didn't have a care in the world. How can we explain that? That isn't human. That is not normal. In Wisconsin, we have life without parole, and that was the maximum sentence that could be imposed, and that's what happened. This is the most brutal murder that has ever been committed by one person in the history of Brown County. That's how severe this case is. This is a crime that would, I believe, merit the death penalty, and for that you have to die in prison.